you know, it made for an odd, uncomfortable time for the congregants there, I'm told, because Michael Jackson is literally disfellowshipped from the Kingdom Hall, as they call it. He disfellowshipped himself by writing a letter. The church at one time tried to pressure him to change the video Thriller. They thought it was too satanic and evil, and he wouldn't do it, and literally dropped out of the religion. And now suddenly he's going back to one of the halls, partaking of the Sunday services, and no one is allowed to speak to a disfellowshipped member. So no one speaks to him when he goes.
Well, it's all interesting. Raul, let me ask you some legal questions about the family. It's an odd thought.
And with the latest from the Court TV News Center, Michael Jackson's ex-wife Debbie Rowe has testified she was not truthful when she praised Jackson's parenting skills on a video made to rebut the damage from a British documentary. But she also testified that nothing she said in that video was scripted. She's back on the stand today under continued direct examination, and joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Once again, Savannah, what do you make of Debbie Rowe's testimony so far?
Well, as I told you last hour, I'm really taking a wait-and-see attitude towards it. You know, she didn't say that her interview was, in fact, not scripted. What she said was she wanted it to be not scripted. She wanted it to be unrehearsed. She rejected a list of questions from Ian Drew, the interviewer, beforehand. She said she wanted it to be a cold interview. In fact, we haven't gotten to the portion of her testimony yet when she describes what really happened. It may well be that it turns out she didn't do a scripted interview as prosecutors have suggested, but I just don't think we're there yet. You know, Tom Sneddon made a very bold promise in his opening statement, so let's hope the prosecutors don't have to eat it. What he said was that the Jackson people took her upstairs and did a complete rehearsal before they ever brought her down to be interviewed. And when she's doing the interview, when they didn't like her answers, they would stop the tape and they would tell her how to answer that. So when Debbie Rowe takes the stand this morning, just a few minutes from now, it's my impression that she'll be asked what happened in that interview. If she tells a story different than what Tom Sneddon said in opening statements, I think the prosecutors have a big problem on their hands. She also testified, as you mentioned, that some of the things she said during that rebuttal interview weren't true. Specifically, she said the things she said about Jackson's parenting skills weren't true. I remember from the rebuttal video that she did praise Jackson as a parent and said that he'd never harm a child, and really extolled the virtues of Michael Jackson as a parent and a friend and everything else. But we haven't yet heard her say in court how it was that what she said was untruthful, what about it was untruthful. Court kind of ended on a cliffhanger because we never really got the answer to what it was that she was untruthful about.
Yeah, and Savannah, we just saw live pictures of Michael Jackson entering the courthouse maybe just a few seconds ago while you were talking. So it will be interesting to see what happens, as you point out, when Debbie Rowe takes the stand today, and see what else the prosecution has to ask her, and see if in fact she did flip from what they expected her to say. Now, speaking of that, what can we expect when the defense gets a chance to cross-examine Debbie Rowe?
Well, I think, I mean, first of all, if she really does say the exact opposite of what prosecutors expected her to say, maybe the defense won't want to hurt her too bad. But assuming that she sticks to what the prosecutors have said she will say, then I think they'll start with that custody battle that she's in right now with Michael Jackson down in Los Angeles. I've read some of the papers that have come out of that, and it's just that the tone of it is really vitriolic. It seems the sides are really opposed. And so Tom Mesereau would be able to point out that if Michael Jackson were convicted in this case, that ultimately Debbie Rowe would have a much stronger chance of getting custody of these children, and so that would give her a motive to lie. I also think that they'll talk about how Debbie Rowe recently stopped getting that, what some people say is up to $1 million a year support payment from Jackson, and that perhaps she's mad and that would give her a motive to lie. I also think we're going to see this rebuttal interview. It's a 3-hour and 2-minute interview, and the defense has suggested outside the presence of the jury to the judge and some legal arguments that if the prosecutors don't play it, they will. They'll play the entire thing. So I think Debbie Rowe could be on the stand quite a while when it comes time for her cross-examination. And I should just tell you, I have the transcript here of yesterday's 40 minutes of direct testimony from her. Tom Mesereau objected 42 times. During just that brief bit of direct testimony, he was sort of on the edge of his seat, ready to pounce. And at some points, it was like he was objecting to every single question. At many times, Debbie Rowe seemed to get exasperated, kind of sighing. You know, she had her hand on her chin. She started to answer once, and then she kind of looked over at Mesereau. He objected, and she sort of gave that like, oh, yeah, well, I guess he would object. kind of looks. She seemed to get really exasperated, but of course all of us court watchers are very used to lots of objections from the defense.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see when that confrontation does happen, when Mesereau gets a chance to cross. Now, the prosecution was expected to wrap up its case this week. Will that in fact happen, and who else will they call?
You know, I don't think they're going to wrap up this week because I think they've got a little bit more to go. For one thing, I think the next witness will be Iris Finsilver. She is the attorney who has long represented Debbie Rowe. She represented Rowe in her divorce from Michael Jackson. She's representing Debbie Rowe right now in that custody battle I mentioned. And she was there at that interview that Debbie Rowe did with Mark Schaffel and all the Jackson people as the rebuttal to the Bashir documentary. And in fact, Tom Sneddon mentioned her in his opening statement, saying, if you don't believe Debbie Rowe, you don't have to, because her attorney, who was present during that entire time, is going to testify that that's exactly what they did, i.e. rehearsed her, coached her, and expected her to give enthusiastic responses. So I think she's the next witness. Then, much to everyone's dismay, I think we will have some more phone records people. We had about 5 of them yesterday. I think we probably have 3 more. Prosecutors still may call a forensic accountant. Remember, part of their case is that they suggest that Michael Jackson had a financial motive, not just a PR motive, to try to stem the tide of the bad public relations that the Bashir documentary caused, because the prosecutors suggest he has terrible financial problems. At one point, the prosecutor said he's on the precipice of bankruptcy, he told the court in a motions hearing. So we may hear some financial testimony from a forensic accountant. Then there are a couple of other witnesses I expect to hear from. Ian Drew, who did the interview with Debbie Rowe, and a man by the name of Rudy Provenzio. He was there during the Rowe interview, but more importantly, he's a close associate of Mark Schaffel, one of the alleged co-conspirators. They found a bunch of documents related to this case in Mark Schaffel's house. Rudy Provenzio should be able to connect for jurors what those documents mean, how they're related to this case, and the prosecutors would argue how they're related to the conspiracy in this case.
Reporting live from Santa Maria, California, Savannah Guthrie. Thanks once again, Savannah. And stay tuned to Court TV. We will continue to have live updates from outside the courthouse. We will have
also did some pretext phone calls for the Sheriff's Department, acting as a sort of information conduit for them, because he knew Frederick Mark Schaffel and Dieter Wiesner and Ronald Konitzer and Vinny Amen and Frank Cassio Tyson. So how many phone calls he made, I don't know, but I think he is going to be the big knock it out of the park boffo witness, according to the state anyway. Michael Jackson's leaving, by the way.
There's a live shot of Michael Jackson leaving. What's he wearing today?
Well, it's kind of a navy blue thing, very unusual because he usually wears black. And the pants he's been wearing, I bet they're probably tailor-made because they're this sateen fabric. Really pretty and drapey, and, you know, he just looks so darn
You're a
thin
bigger
these days,
fan of his clothing than I am, Diane, I have to say. But I gotta say, you had me at skullduggery, Diane. What a great word. Gloria, let me go to you, because there's something I think our viewers should hear. I know when the accuser's mother was on the stand, you know, everybody made fun of her. She was such a nut. She was so hysterical and long-winded, etc. But there was one little detail that I picked up on. She said that at one point, when Michael Jackson was talking to her, he changed from his usual rather high-pitched voice and spoke to her in a very deep, manly voice, and she found that intimidating. And I thought of you immediately because you had a little experience with that, didn't you?
I did.
I want to bring Savannah.
Hit it!
Well, Savannah, the rebuttal video was not shown, and I was sort of interested with 9 hours of tape. There's the video itself, and there's probably, what, 8 hours of outtakes. Was there any explanation? Did anybody try to introduce this, or did it seem that the state was avoiding showing the tape itself?
I don't think the state ever really planned to put this interview on, but the defense has certainly threatened that if the judge let Debbie Rowe testify, they were going to play all 3 hours and 2 minutes of this interview. Debbie Rowe said she thinks the interview went a lot longer than that. It was a 9-hour interview. In any event, it was a 3-hour and 2-minute tape. The defense didn't play it. I don't know why. Maybe because they felt they were ahead of the game by the time it was all over and they didn't need to do it. I can tell you Judge Melville gets very tired when he hears long interviews, long questioning, long tapes. He gets a little bit tired of it. I'm sure he would have allowed them to do it, but I think Tom Mesereau felt like he got what he wanted from this witness and more. Yeah. In fact, there was a point at which Tom Mesereau had made a motion to strike Debbie Rowe's testimony before he got to his cross. And at the end of his cross-examination, he said, no further questions, and I withdraw my motion to strike her testimony. Clearly sending a message, we love this witness, we love her.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to bring in the panel and get some answers, and then we're going to get to our 13th juror early tonight. I want to find out what everybody thinks about Debbie Rowe, and I'll start with Yale Galander. Yale, what do you think?
I have to disagree with almost everything that Diane said, even though I know she's doing such a great job out there. This witness was the greatest defense witness that Mesereau could have created. Look at what she did.
Michael Jackson fans appeared at the Santa Maria courthouse bright and early this morning to get a seat for today's proceedings in what is expected to be one of the last days of the prosecution case. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Hello, Savannah. Are prosecutors going out with a bang or a whimper as they conclude their case this week?
Well, I have a feeling they think it's a bang, and we'll have to wait and see, and we'll be the judge, I guess. I believe their last witness is likely to be a man by the name of Rudy Provenzio, who's really a close associate of Mark Schaffel, one of the alleged co-conspirators in this case. And I believe prosecutors hope that Rudy Provenzio will pull it all together for them as far as the conspiracy charge is concerned. Remember, there were a lot of documents that were found in Mark Schaffel's home, and it's Rudy Provenzio they're counting on to explain the meaning of these documents, to identify the handwriting on these documents, and try to pull the conspirators all together and put Michael Jackson as part of that conspiracy. But until then, today on tap, we expect to hear from some financial witnesses. Specifically, there's a guy by the name of DeRoss O'Brien. He's a forensic accountant, and he's taken a look at Michael Jackson's finances, and he'll be able to testify at least generally about the state of Michael Jackson's financial affairs in February of 2003. The prosecutors have argued that this goes to the heart of the motive in this case. Not only were they trying to stem the tide of the bad public relations for Michael Jackson, because it was certainly a public relations disaster, but also because they will argue that Jackson was in dire financial straits and needed to make money from that rebuttal video, which ultimately he did receive $3 million for from Fox. We also expect to hear from a bank personnel person who will testify that Frank Tyson, one of the alleged co-conspirators, went in with a letter from Michael Jackson asking for $1 million in cash. And so prosecutors hope that will make some headway in putting Michael Jackson into the middle of this conspiracy. And we also expect to hear from some police officers who are going to tie together some of that telephone records evidence we got last week. I think by my count we had 9 different witnesses from various cell phone companies, local companies, and long-distance service companies. And we really didn't know what the meaning of it was, but these police officers should be able to pull it together, and they want to demonstrate that there was a flurry of activity, phone calls among and between the co-conspirators. So that's what's on tap for today.
Savannah, it sounds like a lot of witnesses. We've heard the defense case might start Wednesday. Do you think that's overly optimistic? And do you know if we can expect Michael Jackson himself to take the witness stand in his own defense?
Well, I do think late Tuesday afternoon would be the earliest that the prosecution could rest. It probably will be Wednesday because, as you say, there are a lot of witnesses on tap, and depending on how long the cross-examinations are, it could go quite a while. But I think the defense will start this week. How's that for going out on a limb there? And as for Michael Jackson taking the stand, I mean, that's the speculation. Everybody's wondering if he will. We all know that Tom Mesereau sort of hinted at that in opening statements, but I don't think anyone's really holding him to it, in the sense that he didn't issue a direct promise saying, I will put Michael Jackson on the stand. Some people have said that Tom Mesereau is known for putting defendants on the stand. He's not afraid to put his client on the stand. And certainly for Michael Jackson, who's a public figure who wants to speak his own mind, I mean, frankly, his participation in the Bashir documentary, if nothing else, shows that he's somebody who wants to express himself and wants to get his side of the story across. You know, he may insist on taking the stand, and as you well know, Amanda, it ultimately is the client's decision. Even if a lawyer said, you know, in your best interest, I don't think you should take the stand, if the client insisted on taking the stand, that is the client's decision, and the lawyer would have to abide by it. Michael Jackson may feel that after sitting through almost 10 weeks of testimony, all the things that have been said about him, he may want to take the stand and tell jurors his side of the story.
And that's absolutely right, Savannah. He certainly seems like he is very eager to tell his side, so that is a distinct possibility. What other witnesses do you expect the defense to call?
Well, they have a long list, and Tom Mesereau has said in motions hearings and here and there during the trial that he will call a lot of witnesses. And we can only really speculate based on his opening statement and some of the things that have been said over the course of the trial. I think we're going to hear from a young man by the name of Rio Jackson. The defense won this legal motion. They've won the right to call this witness, a witness who will say that he saw the accuser masturbating, that he saw the accuser, that the accuser wanted to look at pornographic films together. So I think that they will call that witness. Certainly, there's the possibility that they'll call Macaulay Culkin, somebody that the prosecutors have suggested through their witnesses was a victim of molestation by Michael Jackson. Macaulay Culkin, for many, many years, has said that he is not a victim and that Michael Jackson never did anything inappropriate. The question is whether he'll come and testify. Some people have suggested he may be the lead-off witness for the defense, so we may find out later this week if that is the case. There are a couple of other alleged victims who say that they are not victims, and certainly the defense would like to call them if they could get them to come and testify. The guys' names are Wade Robeson and Brett Barnes. They're adults now, so they may come and testify. Then I think we're going to hear from a lot of Neverland employees. Some employees will testify, I believe, to bad behavior on the part of the accuser and his brother at Neverland. Remember that Tom Mesereau has suggested that these boys were just hellions at Neverland, that it was they who broke into Michael Jackson's wine cellar, drinking alcohol, all without Michael Jackson. And also they'll suggest that these boys got into Michael Jackson's pornographic materials without Jackson knowing about it. And actually, Tom Mesereau mentioned during his opening statement that there was a time that Jackson actually caught the boys going through his adult materials and that he took them away from these boys. So I think we'll hear from employees in that regard. And then there will also be some employees who will come in and testify that they were in a position to see Michael Jackson's interactions with children and that they never saw anything inappropriate. So that's kind of a flavor of what we can expect from the defense, but I'm sure there'll be some surprises in tow.
Maybe some Hollywood notables as well. Savannah, nice seeing you. Thank you so much for that report. Savannah Guthrie reporting live from Santa Maria, California. Stay tuned to Court TV. We will
spirit of happiness and joy in these boys' faces. This is the spirit of boyhood, a life I've never had and have dreamed of, the life I want for my children. But when you look inside these books, Amanda, it is, according to one expert I spoke to, Dr. Patricia Farrell, out there in Fort Lee, New Jersey, she looked at it and she said, this is just child erotica. There are a lot of pictures of, you know, close-ups, portraits of boys' faces, but then inside the pages of the book, scattered throughout the more than 200 pages of a photographic essay, for example, are these completely nude pictures of boys, full frontal nudity. There's a picture of a boy climbing a tree shot from below, and he has a frightened look on his face, only wearing a pair of tennis shoes, for example. She said that these types of books are often used to groom a target. In other words, the adult will sit with the child and look and say, gee, look, doesn't this look like fun? Wouldn't you like to go swimming like this, naked like this? So I think the significance of these books cannot be overstated, and I think when the jury gets back to that deliberation room, I think it's the state's hope that they will make a beeline for those books to check out what's inside.
It's interesting you mentioned the inscription, Diane.
Lots of red ink. On cross-examination, Tom Mesereau really zeroed in on this man and said, asked questions like, well, didn't you know the Beatles catalog? That's the Sony ATV Beatles catalog. There are other artists in it, of course. It's worth $1 billion, and O'Brien shot back, well, it may be worth $1 billion, Mr. Mesereau, but Michael Jackson does not own it all anymore. He owns only half of it, and his half of it is diminished because he keeps borrowing from his half. So if and when they sell it, and he could sell it in December 2005, he'd get $200 million for it. But he's got to pay back a lot of things to bring the Sony side up to equal with his side. And he questioned him very sharply and deeply, Mr. Mesereau did, on the fact of, all right, you're doing this analysis. Did you take into account any entertainment business opportunities Michael Jackson might have? I said, well, no. Well, did you take into account any marketing opportunities he might have? Michael Jackson videos, Michael Jackson fragrances, Michael Jackson tours, concert tours. He said, no, but I'll tell you, the cash crisis is real. If it could have been solved by simply doing one business transaction, then why wasn't it? He said it was so bad that the bank just absolutely started you know, to crash down on him and want more collateral for things. And he said, well, why then, if it was as bad as you say, Mr. O'Brien, why didn't Michael Jackson claim bankruptcy? And he shot back, because Michael Jackson had the ability to keep on borrowing, and that's what he did, and that's what got him into the mess that he's in. So it did go on and on, but that's the gist of this financial stuff today.
Diane, I'm just in awe of being that much in debt. What was he?
You know, Billie Jean and Thriller and all of his own songs. It had been worth about $123 million. It fell in value to about $70 million, and the bank came back and said, we need to have more collateral for this. You got to put up part of Neverland. So he wasn't spending it on Neverland. In fact, Neverland's assets were going out. There was no great detail about, you know, he took a trip there, or he gave this person a lot of money, or he spent this on charity. We didn't hear that today. The judge wouldn't allow all that minute detail. He just allowed a big overview picture, and boy, did we get a picture of Michael Jackson's money problems.
You know, Diane, how is this relevant to child molestation?
Well, it goes to the conspiracy charge. If you believe the state's version of things, Michael Jackson was in such debt at the time that Martin Bashir came knocking and said, can I please do a special documentary on you? The state claims that Michael Jackson decided, you know what, this would be just the thing to kickstart my career, when in fact it had the opposite effect. When all these charges of child molestation came out, that is what the state says caused panic within Team Jackson, and that's why they tried to keep this family close, too close, because they needed them to help make a rebuttal video that they could sell for $7 million. That was another thing Mesereau said to this financial expert. He said, so let's just say that he was in as much financial trouble as you say, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. He said, all right. He said, if, say, Fox came knocking on your door and said that we'll buy a rebuttal video from you for $7 million, he said, that wouldn't make much of a difference, would it, sir? And he said, no, it wouldn't. He said, it's not even worth committing a crime over, is it? And there was a big objection. It was sustained, and the witness, of course, didn't answer that question. But it's pretty clear. Everything that Michael Jackson owes is so borrowed upon, so crisscrossed with collateralization that, boy, it's going to take a wizard to get him out of this.
Diane, any jury reaction?
Yeah, you know, there is a woman that sits in the front row. She's actually an alternate, but I noticed she runs a ranch, a local ranch. She is like she's in the office for her husband at this ranch. And I noticed her paying very close attention and kind of shaking her head like, whoa, if these were my books, I'd be worried. You know, of course, she didn't say anything like that. And juror number 2, he sits in the back. He's a regular juror. He's a Hispanic man in his early 60s. He's married to an accountant. He has an advanced degree. I don't know what his degree is in, but he lives and is married with to an accountant. And so he seemed to take particular interest in it, watching the action back and forth, taking a lot of notes. I think some of it was a little dry, but this witness was so responsive to the questions and seemed to talk in, you know, normal speak instead of CPA speak, that I think it held people's attention.
Let me go to Alec Rose, criminal defense attorney in the California jurisdiction. Alec, what do you make of Jackson's
president of Neverland Valley Entertainment? I'll give you a quote. Rudy Provenzio just said that Michael Jackson is meticulous. He wants to know everything that's going on. He's a great businessman. I think prosecutors are counting on this witness to portray a different picture of Michael Jackson. Tom Mesereau, in his opening statement, made it look like Jackson was sort of this eccentric artist who was, you know, well above what all of his handlers were doing, and if they were up to no good, Jackson certainly didn't know about it. Rudy Provenzio is being called to put that assertion to rest.
Yeah. All right, I want to ask Victor and Mike about that. Is there any chance, Mike, that we could see finally a pulling together of the conspiracy charge where Michael would actually face prison time for the conspiracy but possibly be acquitted on the molestation?
Well, they better do it now because they sure haven't done it up to this point, and hopefully this witness can pull it together for Tom Sneddon. I mean, up to this point, he's had a completely disjointed prosecution. He's had his own witnesses completely backtrack on him. He's been forced to impeach his own witnesses. If he doesn't have somebody to pull this all together, he's going to be in a big, big world of hurt come time when he rests and Tom Mesereau gets the chance to put on his rebuttal case, because I know Tom Mesereau, and I'm sure he's well prepared, and he knows what he's going to put on, and at the end of the day, it's going to look like the prosecution has nothing.
It's from Amanda Grove.
Hello again, I'm Amanda Grove with the latest from the Court TV News Center. The prosecution is wrapping up its case in the Michael Jackson child molestation trial with testimony concerning ex-wife Debbie Rowe, the pop star's financial crisis, and the conspiracy charges. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, I just wanted to first let our viewers know that Michael Jackson has arrived at the courthouse today. Now tell us, what can we expect in the courtroom today?
Well, Amanda, this could be the day that the prosecution rests its case. As far as we know, this is their last witness, Rudy Provenzio. He's on the stand right now, and he's still in his direct testimony. What he said so far is essentially that he was a key aide to Mark Schaffel, one of the alleged co-conspirators, from about 2001 through the key time period in February and March of 2003. Prosecutors have suggested in court documents that Rudy Provenzio was in the loop with Michael Jackson and the men around him, the alleged co-conspirators. Specifically, they expect Rudy Provenzio to testify that Vinnie Amon, one of the alleged co-conspirators, told him there were signs posted at Neverland saying that the accuser was not to leave the property. That Vinnie Amon also told them that there was a secret tape recording done of the family's interview with child welfare officials in Los Angeles. And also that Mark Schaffel, another of the alleged co-conspirators, told Rudy Provenzio that the family had escaped from Neverland at one point, being driven away in the dead of night by a Neverland employee. Rudy Provenzio is the catch-all witness for this conspiracy. Prosecutors are counting on him to pull it together, to identify the key documents, to put Michael Jackson right in the heart of this conspiracy. We'll see how he does today.
That's for sure. Savannah, a sheriff's investigator yesterday said Debbie Rowe told him that the singer was, quote, a sociopath. Tell us about the testimony of Steve Robel.
Well, this was necessary because, as you know, Amanda, Debbie Rowe was very much a disappointment for prosecutors on the stand last week. In her trial testimony, she told jurors that Jackson was a wonderful father, great with kids, a great parent, a giving person. Well, she was singing a different tune during a March 2004 interview with police officers where she made that comment you just mentioned. She called Jackson a sociopath who regarded his children as possessions. She also said that she didn't tell the truth in the rebuttal interview she had done for Michael Jackson. She said she stuck to their prearranged plan after their divorce to always speak positive about one another, but she said that she did speak positive, but those were not true statements. Of course, on the stand, she had said that everything she said in the rebuttal interview was true. On cross-examination, Tom Mesereau pointed out that Debbie Rowe had a lot of animosity towards Michael Jackson because of their custody battle, because of her efforts to get her children back, and that at one point she told the officer in that tape-recorded interview, basically, F the defense, I want the kids. And she actually used the expletive. So I don't know what jurors will take away from Debbie Rowe. Somewhere she's not telling the truth. They may just decide to throw out her testimony altogether.
Certainly, you will consider the motive behind it. What does Jackson's financial crisis have to do with this case, Savannah?
Well, prosecutors will argue that it is a motive for the conspiracy. Not only was Michael Jackson devastated in a public relations sense because of the Bashir documentary, but he was so badly in need of cash, prosecutors argue, that he was desperate to have the family participate in that rebuttal video. Having the family's participation, having Debbie Rowe's participation, basically increased the value to the various networks who were vying to buy that documentary from Michael Jackson. So the prosecution argument goes. That's why they called on a forensic accountant to the stand who testified to Jackson's really dire financial situation from 1999 to 2003. Let me just throw a couple of numbers at you. They said that Jackson was overspending about $20 to $30 million per year, spending more than what he earned. In February of 2003, which is the key time period when the Bashir documentary aired, he was $270 million in debt. He had another $10.5 million in unpaid vendor invoices, basically unpaid bills, and just $38,000 in cash. This witness also testified that between 1999 and 2003, Mr. Jackson's debts rose $70 million. So, of course, the prosecutors want to contend that he was in a very bad financial situation, was absolutely desperate to get cash on hand.
Those numbers are just so shocking to mere mortals like us. Savannah, finally, talk about what we can expect once the defense case begins.
Well, the defense case could begin as early as today, but I bet you we won't hear from any witnesses until tomorrow at the earliest, because at the close of the prosecution case, the defense, of course, will ask the judge to throw out the case, a routine motion that is always asked for and rarely granted, as you know. We are made to understand that the defense's first witnesses will be Wade Robeson and Brett Barnes, and their mothers and their sisters. Now, these are two boys that prosecutors have suggested are victims of molestation at the hands of Michael Jackson. These boys are now young men, and they have always denied that Michael Jackson did anything inappropriate with them. It's our understanding that they will be among the defense's first witnesses. And of course, the defense is still hoping to get Macaulay Culkin, another person that the prosecutors have said was molested by Michael Jackson, but who has always denied it. You hear different things about Macaulay Culkin. That's a story that's changing every day. I have a feeling we really won't know for sure until he actually comes in here and testifies, if he does at all.
See if he does. That will be an interesting day. Savannah, thank you so much for that report. Savannah Guthrie, of course, reporting live from Santa Maria. And stay tuned to Court TV. We will continue to have live updates from outside the courthouse.
Tonight at 9, it's Forensic Files. At 9:30, it's Body of Evidence. And at 10, he terrorized Kansas for over 3 decades. It's Hunting BTK.
After calling 85 witnesses over the course of 2 months, prosecutors finally crossed the finish line, so to speak, and have rested their case in chief against Michael Jackson. Good morning and welcome to Trial Heat and our special report on Michael Jackson's case. I'm Jamie Floyd. In about a half an hour, defense attorneys are expected to make a motion for acquittal. And then, if that's denied, they'll call their first witness. So this morning, we're going to take a look at the 5 key moments of the prosecution's case. And then at 12:30 Eastern Time, we'll have another special report with the latest on what's happening inside the Santa Maria courtroom and the Jackson case. Also today, we're in a verdict watch in Ohio. The jury in Charles McCoy's murder trial has been deliberating for a little over 3.5 hours so far. We'll have the latest in half an hour, along with some important highlights from that trial. But we're going to begin today in California, where prosecutors wrapped up their case against Michael Jackson late yesterday afternoon. So what were the 5 biggest moments of their case? Well, of course, there was the dramatic testimony of the accuser, known only as John Doe. He told the jury Jackson plied him with alcohol and molested him on 2 separate occasions. Then the accuser's mother, probably the state's most controversial witness, her testimony went to the heart of the conspiracy charge against Jackson, but defense attorneys attacked her credibility, suggesting she was only out for Jackson's money. Prosecutors were hoping Jackson's ex-wife, Debbie Rowe, would also bolster the conspiracy charge, but she appeared to do the state more harm than good when she testified that the singer was easy prey at the hands of his associates. Jurors also heard about other alleged past incidents of abuse by Jackson, including testimony from the son of Jackson's former maid, who told the jury through much emotion that the singer molested him beginning when he was just 7.5 years old. And then, of course, the jury saw several sexually explicit adult materials confiscated at Neverland Ranch. So those are 5 key moments in the state's case. Those were the 5 that we picked out. Of course, so many more, and we are waiting today for the defense to call its first witness. Joining us now from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, very, very hard to boil this case with all its twists and turns into 5 little tidbits, but I think we did a pretty good job, and I would guess you agree that the accuser would be perhaps the most significant witness because, of course, the charges really revolve around him, don't they?
I completely agree with that. This case will rise and fall on the accuser and his testimony and whether or not the jurors believe the accuser when he took the stand. You know, I know there are other counts. I know there's this conspiracy case. I know there are these alcohol charges. But the bottom line is this is a molestation case. And whatever the jurors decide about that accuser, my guess is that's what will decide whether or not he's going to be convicted or not.
Now, I've heard some assessments, Savannah, today by some analysts, and of course we're at a disadvantage because we don't have a camera in there, so we listen to all the different voices that come out of that courtroom. Some analysts saying that perhaps the conspiracy case, being a little bit weaker, has diluted the molestation charge. Any sense of that in reporting on what the prosecution is feeling now at the end of its case?
Well, you know, I think there are 2 camps on that. There are some who think the conspiracy charge was weak, it's just a make-weight, and that it hasn't been particularly strong in terms of the evidence, and that prosecutors had a misstep by charging it that way. There's another camp that suggests that it was very smart to charge the conspiracy because whether or not the jurors ultimately convict on conspiracy, it allowed the prosecutors to bring in the full picture of what was going on with Michael Jackson and the men around him, and that at the end of the day, might just have some relevance to the molestation, in the sense that Jackson and his people are doing something. There seems to be some kind of cover-up, at a minimum some kind of urgency, and does that suggest there was something nefarious going on vis-a-vis this young boy? The other neat part about a conspiracy charge, as you know, is that prosecutors can then bring in the statements of alleged co-conspirators. At the end of the day, the conspiracy charge carries a sentence of 1 to 4 years. And if he were convicted on the conspiracy and the molestation, the conspiracy charge really wouldn't add a lot there in terms of a prison sentence. So, you know, it's hard to say. Some people think that because the conspiracy charge seems to be a little bit weak, that somehow jeopardizes the prosecution's credibility as a whole. Other people disagree, and let our viewers decide.
That's what it's all about. You know, it's an astute observation, of course, that they got around the hearsay rule, because the law is written that if you charge conspiracy, a lot of testimony can come in about what people said in furtherance of that conspiracy, and hearsay otherwise would leave a lot of information out. Savannah, this is, of course, all about the jury in the end. Is there some budding report out there about one of the jurors this morning?
Yes, and we have to give credit to your old colleagues at ABC News for reporting this. They say, they're quoting a source who says that the sister of one of the jurors who's a Hispanic male, works as a cashier, works with the maid's son who came and testified. Now, this was the prior bad acts evidence. This is not the accuser in this case, but remember, this is the 24-year-old former youth pastor who came in here and testified that Jackson molested him when he was a boy, and his mother was a former maid at Neverland. Apparently, according to ABC News, this was not disclosed by this juror during voir dire. Now, that name of the maid's son certainly was read in open court, and the jurors were to say whether they knew these people. The fact of the matter is this juror may not have realized that his sister knew him, but what really raises questions in my mind, seeing this report, is how do they know now? Does this mean that the juror has been speaking with his sister, with whom he lives, about this case? So I don't know if this has been reported.
They're not supposed to do.
They're not. One of those things that you really got to feel for jurors. You know, they sit there. It's practically like prison time to sit there and listen to all the testimony. They can't talk to each other. They can't talk to anybody that they live with. They can't talk to their loved ones. They just have to listen. And this is, you know, for all intents and purposes, all they're doing with their lives. If they can't talk about it, they're not supposed to. So I don't know what fallout this will have, whether the juror will want to, whether the judge will want to question the juror about this report. The defense may ask the judge to do that, and the judge, of course, will have to be very cautious. Anytime there's a juror issue in the middle of the trial, judges are very, very cautious.
Yeah, and I bet Judge Melville's not happy about this one. Let me take a moment, Savannah, to turn to Bill Bastone of thesmokinggun.com. Thank you so much. I know you're one of the founders, and you're a good friend to Court TV, and we have not been on the set together. This is our first time on the set together, which is a real treat. Usually you're in that little box that I'm looking at. So Bill Bastone, you know this case inside out. You've been an investigative journalist for a very long time. You heard our top 5. Very unfair to put you on the spot like this, but I'm gonna. What was the biggest moment for the prosecution in this case? Positive moment. Not negative moment, positive moment, which I know from hearing you comment on the case, you're going to have to struggle to find.
I think there were a lot of negative moments. But, I mean, I think that there are aspects of John Doe's testimony that, well, I agree with Savannah. Listen, it's going to come. If the jury buys the kid's account, Michael Jackson.
That he may sleep with young boys, but nothing inappropriate, nothing sexual ever happens. They both said that repeatedly. Wade Robson especially was in for a very tough cross-examination. He, in the beginning, was testifying sitting very straight and tall in the chair. He's a choreographer, and he has a nice, lean, tall body. But by the time District Attorney Ron Zonen was done with him, he was slumped down over the microphone, his booming voice sort of much more quiet. Ron Zonen got this young a man to admit that, yes, he slept with Michael Jackson from the age of 7 all the way to 13. He did sleep with him once when he was 14 years old, but after that, he said, at 14, we stopped sleeping together. Exactly the indication that the state has given this jury, that at some point in time, Michael Jackson's young special friends just become too old for his tastes. And furthermore, Ron Zonen got this young man to take a look at some of the adult materials taken from Michael Jackson's bedroom. He laid these books in front of him on the witness box, and I noticed the jurors sort of strained to take a look at. They haven't seen the content of these books. They have been described as child erotica. One of the books was of a homosexual nature, men performing sex acts with other men, and he laid these books. Now, if you see these, flip through the pages with me, and what do you see? Well, I see naked young boys with their legs spread, and yes, their genitalia is exposed, page after page after page, much in the same vein as the book we've showed our viewers, The Boy, a photographic essay, which you see there on the screen, but much, much more graphic. And Ron Zonen said to him, if you knew a 35-year-old man or 45-year-old man who was in possession of materials like this, would you have a concern about him sleeping with, say, a 10-year-old? And Wade Robson had to really concede, yes, I would have a problem with it. They cleaned it up a little bit on cross-examination, but not to any great extent. So will they bring his mother, Joy Robson, and put her on the stand and have her subjected to perhaps a similar harsh cross-examination? I think that is the plan.
Why would someone let their young son sleep in a room with an adult male? Maybe because he's one of the most famous people in the world. But does being famous mean that Michael Jackson can't be a criminal also? Welcome back to Both Sides and our special coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle-Newsome.
And I'm Vinnie Politan. Jackson's attorneys hit the ground running last week as their case in defense of the pop star began. They called numerous Neverland guests who all testified that nothing sinister was going on behind closed doors. Joining us now is a man who is one of the lucky ones who was behind the closed doors of that Santa Maria courtroom. He's one of our favorite guests here on Both Sides, CBS National Radio correspondent Steve Futterman. Steve, welcome back to the show. Beginning of a new week. What's taking place inside in that courtroom?
Well, we're taking sort of a deep breath after all the exciting testimony of last week. Right now, today, we've had current and former Neverland employees take the witness stand. We're not having any of that, what you might call bombshell testimony from last week. At the moment, a woman by the name of Violet Silva is on the witness stand. She is the security coordinator, still works at Neverland, and she's been testifying for the last hour or so. Right now, she's been focusing a great deal on how easy it is to leave and re-enter Neverland. There are fences there, but it's not really that difficult if you want to escape Neverland. It seems the defense trying to challenge these suggestions by the prosecution all along that the accuser and the accuser's family were kept somehow captives inside Neverland. So that seems to be the focus right now of the defense.
Okay, well, this is also some impeachment testimony, too. Do you think it's very credible? Is it coming off believable? I mean, where, does it stand now?
Well, I think right now, again, I think today is sort of, at the moment, sort of a deep breath. We did have one witness earlier who brought up something very interesting. She's a former maid who worked at Neverland, and she talked about the accuser's mother. Of course, I've said all along, this is what the defense wants to make it, the trial of the accuser's mother. But she said something interesting that can be interpreted different ways. She said the accuser's mother asked her for a job. And this former maid at Neverland said, well, your son is ill, he has cancer, you live far away. She suggested, the accuser's mother said, well, I might move up here to take a job at Neverland. The former maid then said, well, the rents are very high here. Then the accuser's mother said, well, I'd be willing to sleep in my car if I have to get a job. I need money. I really have lots of burdens right now, financial burdens right now. Well, I mean, you can interpret that two different ways. It doesn't sound like she's trying to trick someone into giving her money, and in fact, it might sound, if you want to take the prosecution side, as this is a woman who really wanted to work somehow and wanted to work and make money the old-fashioned way. She wanted to earn it.
Yeah, well, let's bring in Eddie Hayes. Eddie, what do you make of this? I think that helps the prosecution. This woman is desperate to work and try and make some money. She's asking maid. She doesn't know that means going to come back and testify.
I agree with you, Kimberly. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. Probably the best-looking Irish.
Exactly what the state has presented here.
Well, you know what I think they really got in, the defense brought it up, and I think the state kind of expanded on it. Neverland Ranch is a huge place. Violet Silva said it's 5 square miles, 2,700 acres, lots of parts of the rooms and the house that nobody is ever allowed to go into. They started asking her questions about the locks on the master bedroom suite door, and she said, well, you know, I know they're there, but that's a very private part of the house. Nobody goes there. So, I mean, we did have an allegation that there was some inappropriate sexual contact between Michael Jackson and a boy, the '93 boy, in the cabana area near the pool. But most of the rest of, I think, the state's problem is centered on that bedroom, and just not very many people get to go there.
You're talking about how big Neverland is. Neverland is about 5 square miles. So bottom line,
2,700 acres.
The argument would be by the state that how would these various people in charge of security and the front security gate know what the heck's going on in Michael Jackson's bedroom? Diane Dimond,
or the chef in the kitchen.
Yeah,
right.
Excuse me, the major domo. Okay, I didn't know what that was till you explained it to me. We don't have those in Macon. We don't have major domos.
They don't have them in Albuquerque either, dear.
So tell me the security measures on Jackson's bedroom door.
Well, there is an alarm pad that when you get to a certain number of feet before the door, a chime goes off. You know, like when you go into a 7-Eleven and you hear that bing bong, bing bong. Well, that's what happens inside Michael Jackson's bedroom suite when somebody is approaching in the hallway. And then there was testimony from several different people that there are 6 individual locks on the inside of the door. So, you know, someone could be alerted that you're coming.
Show you.
Yeah, that's always been one of my favorite Harry Benson photos. In fact, Harry, I don't know if you remember, but you took a picture of my daughter greeting the Pope in Washington, D.C. that I cherish. Anyway, this picture, you know, we have seen a lot of video from inside Neverland here in this courtroom, and these statuettes you see, they are all over the house. The camera of the Sheriff's Department comes down a hallway, and you catch sight of one of these little mannequin-looking, real-life doll sorts of things, and it's really kind of spooky.
Harry, is that a Boy Scout uniform on the figure on the right?
It's a Boy Scout uniform, yes, and that's a Girl Scout. I asked him about it.
And to go into his bedroom, you actually go under the arms of these 2 children
That's
to enter.
It, yes.
That's right.
To enter the bedroom.
You go into the bedroom, but the bedroom was rather kind of messy. You know, it was kind of dirty. The whole place was kind of...
Culkin and Siblings is the title of the next one, and we've all been talking about Macaulay Culkin. Boy, does he look little in that picture, and a little bit dirty, I suppose, running around as any healthy child would, having a great time. What was it like when you were with Macaulay Culkin at Neverland? We're all talking about him now.
No, I wasn't with him, and that's not Neverland.
Oh, that's outside of Neverland.
No, that's on the Upper East Side when they had a house. And it was just a mess, and the kids were all throwing French fries, and they were completely dysfunctional.
Did you see Macaulay Culkin and Michael Jackson interacting?
No, but round the Neverland they had signposts with Macaulay Culkin's face on it, like to the railway station and things.
With Macaulay's face on a picture?
Doing that, yes.
This is a live shot of Michael Jackson leaving the courthouse today, Harry. About 12 years since you were granted access to Neverland. Let's take another look, if we could, in just a moment when we're done with the live shot of Jackson leaving. Jackson and Lisa Marie. Actually, let's skip to the following one because I think we saw that one. I apologize. Jackson on bumper cars. Jackson on bumper cars. Now, this would be inside Neverland. And Harry, when you were there, you saw it in all of its glory. The amusement park aspect. There he is. Tell us about this photo.
It was great fun, and the kids were all laughing, and Michael would say, come on, let's go here, let's go there, let's go and see the big bear or something like that, and everyone would rush. See, my idea is to get as close as I can and get as much as I can in you know, but your time is limited. I wanted inside that house. I wanted the bedroom.
And as we take a look at the last photo, Jackson with Peter Pan painting, Harry, I want to get your comment. I understand that you've said you don't believe for a minute that Michael Jackson's broke.
No, I don't. I mean, how can he be? His world tours, and is very big abroad in Asia. I mean, come on. I mean,
he certainly has the potential for income producing, at least. Diane, you know, as we look at all of these photos, I think Jackson has to concede, and he has conceded, that he has this obsession, and it could be in a very positive way or it could be in a negative way, with children, beyond what most adults have. His home is filled with these images. How much is the jury aware of what it looks like inside Neverland?
Well, Harry's right. Everything that we see, all these videos of inside all of the rooms, they're just completely cluttered. I know someone who worked there many years ago when he first bought the ranch, and it was beautiful with this beautiful furniture. They still have all the furniture, but they have all these other things, all of these tchotchkes and the mannequins, and it's cluttered and it's confusing, and sometimes it just looks downright dirty, I'm told. And the jury has seen that. Yeah, the jury has seen it.
But I will say this, when I left, each time he's got the cook to make me sandwiches and sodas.
He was kind to you.
Absolutely, to drive back to go back to LA with.
So there you were at Neverland, June 1993. That's largely been the subject of this trial. Did you see anything inappropriate, anything that made you uncomfortable?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, really, absolutely no. All I saw was kids having a great time. And I wish I was 9 years old to run about like that.
To run about and have a good time as they all did.
Absolutely, everyone was happy and laughter.
Okay. I'm sorry, Drew Findlay, is that you that wants in? Diane, I apologize. Diane, go ahead.
No, it was me. I just wondered if Mr. Benson, as he looked at Michael Jackson just leaving the courtroom today, sees the stunning difference that I see in him. What he looked like when you were photographing him that last time at Neverland and today.
Well, you see, I think he's got a very interesting face. It's a great face to photograph. I mean,
it's a face that's fascinating to look at, isn't
yes,
it?
It's great. I mean, people get all upset about his face, but to me, all he has to say is, "Hey, I'm in show business." You know, he can do what you like.
He wears the lipstick, he wears the pasty makeup. He's in show business, and so do a lot of other performers.
Yeah, let him enjoy himself.
Although I don't know if their homes look quite like that. All right, thus ends our segment of Court TV Cribs. Harry Benson.
But here because it's California, because of prior bad acts legislation, it came in.
It came in.
So then it makes it, I think, I agree about client control, but it does make it a less difficult calculation about whether or not to put Jackson on the stand to rebut some of that.
But Jamie, what can Michael Jackson add to this right now? He's already created a problem for himself in the Bashir interview. So we know what Michael Jackson is like when he attempts to get up and explain this bizarre lifestyle that he has.
And you can never explain away. I don't care what anyone says. You cannot explain away his belief that he should be allowed to sleep with young boys. I don't believe that is ever going to be accepted by jurors or most people in this society.
Now, we're about to see Michael Jackson step out of this SUV as we do every day, and it does raise something that Richard Meehan touched on, and that is Michael Jackson sitting in the courtroom, even if he never takes the stand, is just a different sort of defendant. And many people would argue the sort of defendant who people have come to see as someone who perhaps is too close to children, and what that means depends on your point of view in this case. But, you know, while we watch him enter that courtroom, I guess, Richard, I'll toss you the question suggested by Ken Montgomery here. The issue of Michael Jackson sleeping with boys, and sleeping can mean so many things, but whatever it means, Michael Jackson has admitted at least sharing the bed with young children. That is out in the courtroom right now. What choice does the defense have but to put him on the stand and try to deal with it head on? They can't get rid of that basic fact.
That fact is indefensible, meaning that there's no way in the world an adult can and should be able to justify sleeping and sharing his bed. And, you know, it was brought out, as I understand, by Mr. Snedden in the cross-examination of Violet Silva yesterday, because apparently it's been reported that she was asked the question, would she allow her child or grandchild to have shared Jackson's bed, and she said no. And, you know, that kind of point can be a very substantial point. You can't defend the act of an adult spending time in the bed with children. So it is what it is. And him taking the witness stand saying, I think it's a wonderful, beautiful thing for me to share my bed with a child, but I didn't touch them in a sexual way. it just doesn't wash to me.
It's not necessary, Ken Montgomery.
No, it's not necessary.
You just make that argument in the end. They fail to prove that extra step, the touching of the privates.
Yeah. And
undermine her credibility, the first maid's credibility. Give us a sense of what these different Neverland employees have told the jury.
Okay, well, let's start with Adrienne McManus. She's the first maid you're talking about. She testified for the prosecution that she saw Michael Jackson engage in inappropriate behavior with 3 boys, Macaulay Culkin, Brett Barnes, and Jordan Chandler, the 93 accuser. Here's what she said on the stand about Macaulay Culkin, particularly relevant today as we wait for his testimony. The question was, what is it that you saw that concerns you? Answer, I was coming out of the bathroom by his bedroom, by Mr. Jackson's bedroom. I was cleaning that bathroom. And when I came out, I saw Mr. Jackson and Macaulay in the library, and Mr. Jackson was kissing him on his cheek, and he had his hand kind of by his leg, kind of on his rear end. Well, when it came time for the defense to start putting on witnesses, they called a maid of their own. You're absolutely right. It's maid versus maid versus maid. There's another maid involved, actually. Anyway, her name was Francine Contreras, and she actually worked with Adrienne McManus, and here's what she had to say about her former colleague on the stand. The question was, did you ever see her take items from the ranch? She's talking about Adrienne McManus. Answer, yeah. Question, and how did she do that? In a laundry basket. She used to take home Mr. Jackson's clothes. She said she was going to iron them, but there was like a hat underneath there, and you can't iron a hat. Well, nobody can disagree with that statement, Jamie, but as we have so often noticed in this case, everybody's got their own baggage. And on cross-examination, Francine Contreras was asked if she was fired from a department store for none other than stealing. She denied that, saying, no, it was trespassing.
I gotta tell you, Savannah, we're watching Michael Jackson arrive. His attire, of course, is a constant source of discussion for the pundits and the fashionistas alike. My favorite quote thus far, I think, in this trial is, you can't iron a hat. There you have it, the defense rests.
Now, a truer statement never was heard.
A truer statement never was heard. But that quote, Savannah, and much of her testimony doesn't really go directly to the allegations about Macaulay Culkin. It goes to undermine the credibility of that first maid, Adrienne McManus, as someone who perhaps can't be trusted. So it's sort of an end run around the direct allegation that Adrienne McManus made on the witness stand, isn't it?
It is, and that's why Macaulay Culkin's testimony is important. I mean, again, it's a two-track strategy. Number one, you can't believe these witnesses because they're not credible, and that's what Francine Contreras did for the defense. And now, if Macaulay Culkin comes in and says, Michael Jackson never touched me, never did anything inappropriate with me, well, then the defense is hoping that puts a fork in that allegation for good.
Now, Savannah, I got to tell you, I'm having more trouble hearing you today than I think any day thus far. Is the fan presence greater today, or are they just louder?
I think they're louder, but there is a small spike. We had 83 fans come in here today and try to get in to the courtroom, which is slightly higher than normal. But, you know, some days they just get very excited, and when Michael Jackson turns back and waves at them, they get very excited. Lately, they've been screaming for Raymond Bain, who is the Jackson spokeswoman. When she comes in, they start yelling for her, and then today she yelled back, and then that gets them even more excited, and it's just kind of, you know, that mob mentality.
I tell you, celebrity by proxy you got going on out there. You just the spokesperson's getting some cheers from the fans. Quickly to Andrew Goldberg of thesmokinggun.com. The maids, maid versus maid versus maid, as Savannah pointed out. How does it wash out? Is it a win for the defense?
Go to Europe, they'd ask you, where do you live? And you'd say Santa Maria. And they'd say, well, where's that? And you'd say, well, do you know where Santa Barbara is? And they'd say, yeah, we know Santa Barbara. We'd say, well, north of Santa Barbara. Now you go to Europe and you say Santa Maria. They say, oh, yeah, the Jackson trial. So the Jackson trial has put Santa Maria on the map. Although we're going to...
Alrighty then, and while the mayor might be so happy that the Jackson trial is boosting Santa Maria's popularity, Michael Jackson himself is hoping Santa Maria is a place where a jury is sympathetic to his plight. Well, welcome back to Both Sides and our special coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle-Newsom.
And I'm Vinnie Politan. Yesterday in court, jurors learned from the Neverland Ranch manager that Michael Jackson has lots of special friends, most of whom are boys. But Jackson's defense team was quick to point out that Jackson also had close bonds with girls, too. But did any of those girls have sleepovers in the King of Pop's bedroom? And of course, the big news of the day, Macaulay Culkin took the stand in defense of his friend. And joining us now with all the latest news from the courtroom is one of our favorite guests here on Both Sides, CBS radio correspondent Steve Futterman. Steve, tell me about, first, let's break it down. Let's take the direct of Macaulay Culkin. What came out on direct?
Well, basically, he did exactly what the defense wanted him to do. He gave a 100% absolute denial that anything happened. Mesro began with a series of rapid-fire questions. He said, "Were you ever molested by Mr. Jackson?" Culkin said, "Never." "Were you ever inappropriately touched?" Culkin said, "Absolutely not." "Did he ever touch you in a sexual way?" Culkin said, "No." Then Mesro said, "What do you think of these charges?" And Macaulay Culkin said, "Absolutely ridiculous." This was exactly what the defense wanted. It's exactly what the defense got.
Wow, as I listen to that, it sounds pretty powerful inside that courtroom. Now, Steve, give us just a little bit about Macaulay Culkin's demeanor on the stand. How did he come in? How was he coming across? And how would you compare him to these other alleged victims who've come in for the defense?
Yeah, he was so calm, so relaxed, never seemed to be rattled, gave his answers in a very matter-of-fact way, seemed very sincere with his answers, even on sometimes vigorous or attempted to be vigorous cross-examination by the prosecution. He just was able to deal with it all very smoothly. Don't want to suggest he was acting, but you know, he's been in these situations before. He's been in the public spotlight before. He's been asked very tough and maybe difficult questions before. He's used to it more than some of these other witnesses have been. So he came across, I think, very, very well for the defense.
All right, well, let's bring in our guests and get their take on this pivotal testimony. Bruce, what do you think?
What does he say on the witness stand? Well, joining us now from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV's Savannah Guthrie. First of all, direct examination. He got up on the witness stand pretty early this morning. They finished up with the witness that they had on at the very beginning of the day and put Culkin on. What did he have to say to the defense attorneys?
Well, on direct, it was short and sweet, as we predicted an hour ago. It was about a 10-15-minute exam. And predictably, he said that Michael Jackson never molested him. He was asked several questions, which I'll read to you. Tom Mesro asked him, did Michael Jackson ever molest you? He said, never. Did he ever touch you improperly? He said, absolutely not. Did he ever touch you in a sexual way? He said, no. Did he touch you in any way that you found to be offensive? He said, no. He was asked what he thought of these current allegations, and he said he thought they were ridiculous. Then he was asked how he learned that he was being accused of being a victim in this case. He said somebody called him and told him to turn on the television because there were these claims being made about him by a former maid and a former cook. And he said, I just couldn't believe that people were saying it, that it was out there. He said, what was amazing to me was that no one approached me. No one asked me. The police didn't even double check. No one asked me to see if it was true. He was asked how many times he had spent the night in Jackson's bedroom, and he said, oh, a handful of times. And then at the end of his testimony, he said, I have never seen Michael Jackson do anything improper with anybody. And that was the end of the direct exam.
And of course, as we said at the top of this, prosecutors opened the door to these kinds of witnesses by saying that the current accuser is not the only victim and trying to show jurors that other young men, including Culkin, had been molested. So what did prosecutors then do, Savannah, with Macaulay Culkin on cross-examination?
Well, it was Prosecutor Ron Zonin's turn to talk to Macaulay Culkin, and he started on that issue of whether anybody had ever asked him if he were, in fact, molested by Michael Jackson. And he said, isn't it true that law enforcement tried to reach you in both 1993 and 2003 on a number of occasions and were rebuffed by your representatives? And he sort of hemmed and hawed and said, well, you know, I don't know about that. He said, isn't it true that your attorney said, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, that you wouldn't be speaking to either side in this case? And he said, well, I think so. You know, I really didn't come and plan to testify here today. He was then asked a series of questions about the time he spent with Michael Jackson, in particular a trip that they took to Bermuda when Macaulay Culkin was about 10 years old. He said that he was supposed to go with this other family, the Goldstein family, and that either Michael Jackson invited himself along or he invited Michael Jackson. In any event, Jackson ended up coming on that trip, and they spent a lot of time together. He said that Jackson gave him a Rolex watch during during that trip, and he acknowledged that he did spend the night with Michael Jackson in the hotel room with him during that trip. He was asked about his activities at Neverland and his countless visits at Neverland, what he was up to. He said, they'd play video games and go to the movies and stay up all night. And he said, he'd basically just flop down, fall asleep wherever he happened to be at the time. Then Ron Zonen said, so what you're really saying when you deny this molestation is that Michael Jackson never molested you when you were asleep. And similar to what Brett Barnes has said, he said, well, I think I would remember if something like that happened. I don't think he ever molested me. And then Ron Zonen came back and said, but you just told us that you once fell asleep literally while playing a video game, in a video game. You don't know whether Michael Jackson ever touched you. He also focused in on some of this grooming stuff. He asked Macaulay Culkin whether or not Michael Jackson referred to him as family, and Macaulay Culkin said yes, he had, and that early on they sort of formed this bond. And he said, I really felt that we understood each other right off the bat. I'm told he's now on redirect examination.
And of course, Macaulay Culkin and Michael Jackson have a special connection in that they were both child stars, and that's something very unique, and I think most people would agree very difficult in our culture. Savannah, when a celebrity takes the witness stand in any case, but perhaps in this case more than others, demeanor becomes very important, maybe even as important as what is actually said substantively on that witness stand. What's Macaulay Culkin's demeanor like, and how is the jury responding?
I think Macaulay Culkin has a very mild, kind of folksy demeanor. We talked about it last hour. A lot of times celebrities have presence in a courtroom, and I think Macaulay Culkin certainly does. He's dressed in a black suit with kind of a white shirt but no tie. He's giving kind of easy answers. He's not getting, hot under the collar under cross-examination, although there was a point when the prosecutor was asking him a series of questions about that Bermuda trip that he said, look, this is 15 years ago. I don't remember all the details. I was 10 years old. And, if I thought I was going to be testifying someday, I suppose I would have tried a little harder to remember. That was the only time I thought he was a little bit ornery on the witness stand. But for the most part, he's pretty mild, but very hard for the prosecutors to pin down. They were trying that same tact that they had done quite successfully with Brett Barnes and Wade Robson, where they got them to kind of make an estimate of how many nights they had spent with Michael Jackson. Macaulay Culkin just continually said, oh, I don't know, a handful of times. And really, I don't think the prosecutors were able to elicit a number out of this witness as to how many nights he had spent with Michael Jackson.
Well, I think everyone agrees, Savannah. Macaulay Culkin, a key witness for the defense. We're going to have you stand by because there's so much to talk about with regard to Macaulay Culkin's testimony, but also related testimony that goes to Macaulay Culkin and what he had to say. We're very fortunate to be joined on this significant day by Flo Anthony. I guess we should take some credit. We actually thought ahead and we asked Flo Anthony.
Hello, I'm Monica Pergament with the latest from the Court TV News Center. Lawyers for Michael Jackson are expected to show more video from an interview in which the pop star denies being, quote, weird. The jury got to see some of that video yesterday in which Jackson stated that he loves children for their innocence and would never hurt them. Joining us now live from outside the Santa Maria Courthouse is Court TV correspondent Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, this video of Jackson arriving at court today that we're looking at right now, while we look at that videotape, tell us a little bit about what we can expect in court today.
Well, they are going to finish playing this video that was shot by Jackson's own personal videographer, a guy by the name of Hamid Moslehi, who actually has already testified for the prosecution in this case. We all remember the Bashir documentary that started this all. Martin Bashir did 3 interviews with Michael Jackson for the purpose of that documentary. And as his cameras were rolling, so were the cameras of Hamid Moslehi, the Jackson personal videographer. And so what the defense has done is show that video in court. It's about 2 hours long. We've got a little bit of it left. So what jurors saw was not only the entire unedited raw footage of these interviews with Jackson, but also some moments that were happening when Bashir's camera was, having a tape change, or they were doing a makeup touch-up, and you heard Bashir's comments on the tape. For one thing, Bashir makes a series of very flattering remarks to Jackson, telling him that his relationship with his children almost makes him weep, that Neverland is a breathtaking and stupendous place, that Jackson's musical is so beautiful and so breathtaking he can't imagine why Jackson has been vilified. The defense, of course, thinks this raises some eyebrows, given the fact that living with Michael Jackson ultimately turned out to be a pretty damaging hit piece on Jackson from their perspective. Another interesting thing about that documentary, though, Annika, or these interviews, is that it allowed Jackson to really explain his lifestyle. Parts of these interviews deal directly with some of the issues at hand. For example, the inordinate amount of time that Jackson spends with young children. And Jackson speaks quite eloquently in some places about his very troubling childhood, abusive childhood, he says, at the hands of his father. And he said he was essentially denied a childhood. And sometimes he is speaking so compellingly on this topic. A lot of the jurors seem to be very captivated by that. More than ever, I noticed jurors in the courtroom really looking at Michael Jackson. Other times when he was speaking about his father and how afraid he was of his father, he said, sometimes I was so afraid I literally would faint as a little boy just at his very presence. A lot of the jurors were looking over at Joe Jackson, who was seated in the courtroom. So it's a very interesting thing that the defense has done here, because in some ways it's allowed Jackson to testify. It's allowed him to explain his lifestyle, of course, without having to be cross-examined.
Clearly, the defense also has to be pleased yesterday with the testimony of its star witness. So tell us about Macaulay Culkin. How was he on the stand? And tell us a little bit about his testimony.
You know, Macaulay Culkin, I think, was universally regarded as having turned in a star performance for the defense yesterday. He did not run into the pitfalls that those other two young men, Wade Robson and Brett Barnes, did on the stand. He adamantly denied many, many times that Jackson ever had molested him. He resisted the prosecutor's suggestions that possibly he could have been molested while he was asleep and never even had known it. He also was very hard to pin down on just how many nights he had spent in Jackson's bed. You know, that's where some of these other witnesses last week ran into some trouble. Remember, Carly Barnes, Brett Barnes' sister, you sort of offhandedly estimated that her brother had spent 365 nights with Jackson, which really kind of cast a pall over the room. I think people were pretty shocked to hear those kind of numbers. Not so with Macaulay Culkin. He just insisted that it was just a handful of times, that it was more a product of happenstance than anything else. You know, he just sort of fall asleep wherever he happened to be at the time. He said, including one time he thinks he actually fell asleep while playing a video game. So in any event, I think he made a pretty compelling witness on the stand, denying that Jackson ever molested him. And he also spoke about his relationship with Jackson. He explained that Jackson gets it. Jackson knows what it's like to be a child actor, and that he appreciated that Jackson reached out to him when Macaulay Culkin was suddenly propelled to instant stardom and was having a hard time dealing with that. He said Jackson came in and was a friend to him, and that's why he considers him a close friend to this day.
Savannah, are some of these witnesses being called by the defense approaching character evidence? And I'm wondering if this could open the door for prosecutors to introduce damaging evidence against Jackson then.
Well, you know, that's the $64,000 question, and it's a question that the judge is ultimately going to have to rule on. You know, prosecutors have filed a motion arguing just what you say. I have it in my hand. They say that by bringing on some of these witnesses, like Carly Barnes, Wade Robson's mother, Brett Barnes' mother, that essentially what the defense has done is introduce evidence of Michael Jackson's good character, that he's a good guy and would never hurt any children. You know, the defendant is entirely within his rights to do that. Of course the defense can do that, but what it does is open the door to the prosecutors asking some of these witnesses, well, what's the basis of your opinion? Would you change your mind if you knew some of the following? One way to describe these is the have you heard questions. Have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? What's interesting is that in this motion, it shows where the prosecutors are going. This is what they'd like to cross-examine some of these witnesses about. They want to ask them about all details of the Jordy Chandler investigation, including his interview with the Los Angeles Police Department. Remember, this is quite graphic stuff. All 1108 witnesses, including the stories of two young men whom the judge did not permit to have their stories or the evidence concerning them brought into the case. The prosecutors think that they're well within their rights now to ask about that. They want to ask about the statement of LaToya Jackson, Michael Jackson's sister, on national television, that she saw a payment of a $1 million check to one of these boys I just mentioned to the family for the purpose of buying silence. They want to show that the defendant, Michael Jackson, has taken numerous children into his room and bed while heavily addicted to Demerol and other controlled substances. You know, the list goes into 2 pages, but I think it shows where the prosecution is going. They're saying, fine, defense, if you want to bring in everybody to say what a great guy Jackson is, well, we'd like to ask a little bit more about that. The defense, of course, will have a chance to respond, and I believe they were supposed to file a response to this motion on Monday. Hasn't been made public yet, and the judge needs to schedule a hearing, presumably sooner rather than later, because witnesses are coming and going. yet the prosecutors haven't to date been able to ask these questions they want to ask. So just something to watch out for in the coming days, see how the judge comes down on this critical issue.
Absolutely. Savannah Guthrie reporting live from Santa Maria, California. Thanks so much for that. Sure. And
with success, people become jealous.
Oh, Martin. Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Diamond, was there to see how the jurors reacted to this video. Hello, Diane. How'd they react?
Hey, Lisa. How are you? Well, you know, they finished up playing the last part of that tape today, just the last 4 minutes, and he was in a different blouse, like a red blouse. It was shot in a different location. And yesterday, we actually saw one of the jurors in the front row start to cry, an Asian woman who's in her late 30s. There were other people visibly moved by that description of Michael Jackson. Yeah. And Michael Jackson had a tissue up. His mother did, too.
At what point were they crying?
All of that. Especially when he spoke about how being so lonely as a child superstar and walking the streets of Encino, where his parents lived, just looking for somebody to talk to. But today, it was just such a short little clip. We heard him mostly talking about the genesis of his children. And now we're set straight on it. We have learned that his sperm was used to create all 3 of his children. The last one, Blanket, with a surrogate mother, and the first 2 he revealed to Martin Bashir because he and Debbie Rowe had sex.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, Diane. I think some of the journalists might have had tears in their eyes hearing how Martin Bashir talked to the subject of his interview. Take a listen to this.
It almost makes me weep when I see you with them, because your interaction with them is just so... I hadn't seen it. And you were the most generous person. But I looked around here yesterday, and some of the people really appreciated it.
All right, got a little mangled, but Diane, you can give us the substance. I think you used the word cloying to describe how Martin Bashir spoke to Jackson.
Sycophantic has also been used by the erudite BBC people right here. Yeah, it was not at all the way an American journalist would conduct an interview. I mean, we just say, oh, really? How did you have your children? Oh, natural conception? Okay, and we'd move on. To him, everything was extraordinary and fabulous and wonderful and awesome, and it got to be a little bit
okay,
much,
but Diane, I mean, besides really getting under our skin a little bit as journalists, it's not illegal. It's, you know, it's a little much, but what's the point of the defense?
And it doesn't matter what we think. Yeah, it doesn't matter what we think anyway. Did it capture the jury's attention? And for yesterday and today, it was Michael Jackson, in effect, testifying in that courtroom. You know, there's no cross-examination to a video, and so it went on, and it gave the jurors a real perspective on what Michael Jackson is like and what he thinks of his own lifestyle.
All right, well, we have more clips to show our viewers, but first let me bring in our panel. Former prosecutors Wendy Murphy and Donald Schweitzer, and criminal defense attorneys Bob McNeil and Yale Galanter. All right, everybody, take a look at this clip that the jury saw.
It almost makes me weep when I see you with them, because your interaction with them is just so natural, so loving, so caring.
Thank you so much.
And everybody who ever comes into contact with you knows that.
All right, let me bring in Bob McNeil for the defense. What is the point? What does the defense gain by showing that perhaps this journalist is a little bit over the top?
Well, one thing you gain is a chance to testify to the jury and tell them about the kind of person you are, to have Martin Bashir making those very loving statements about him and observations that he saw. And you have Michael communicating with the jury without being subject to cross-examination. Now, I don't think that this opportunity, playing those tapes like that, is going to supplant his testimony, which he'll definitely have to do later on. But I think it's a very positive thing for Michael Jackson to have had an opportunity to let the jurors see that. And especially, I mean, they said there were tears brought from some of the jurors. And I think that's extremely important that they can relate to him and understand where this man is coming from, especially following Macaulay Culkin's testimony, which I think really explained what Michael Jackson's all about.
Well, I think you put your finger right on it. And Wendy Murphy, if you're prosecuting this case, what do you do about the fact fact that jurors had tears in their eyes when they saw Michael Jackson on this tape talking about his loneliness, talking about his childhood.
You know, look, I do think he had a terribly lonely childhood, and I feel bad for him, too. But if they're sobbing about those crazy questions, and, you know, Bashir saying, oh, you're so natural and loving with your children, I hope those were tears because they were on the verge of vomit. Because remember, the rest of the Bashir video showed Michael Jackson holding one of his infants in his arms, trying to feed him the bottle, you know, and it was like going up the kid's nose. He doesn't know how to care for children. He's not natural with children. Dangling a child over the balcony is not natural and loving for children. This jury, if there's a reason they're crying because they feel heartfelt about, or you know, they're connecting with him because he's such a loving father, then I think we need some legal reform in California so that, oh, I don't know, how about a basic IQ test before they're allowed to sit in judgment?
But Wendy, you know, here's
number.
But we're going to go out to Tennessee in just a moment. Also today, Michael Jackson's defense continues inside a Santa Maria, California courthouse. The singer's former attorney, Mark Garagos, is expected to testify. Many of you, of course, will remember him from the Scott Peterson trial, and the judge in the Jackson case has ordered him to appear this morning. We're going to have the latest in our special report in about a half an hour at 12:30 Eastern Time. In the meantime, we're in
to show up at court this morning, despite the attorney's pleas that his own court schedule was just too packed. Joining us now from outside the Santa Maria courthouse is Court TV's chief investigative editor, Diane Diamond. Diane, always nice to see you. Let's start with Mark Garagos, if we can. First of all, tell us a little bit about the struggle to get him here, and then why is it, as best we can determine, that the defense wants him on the witness stand?
Well, they want to get him on the witness stand, simply put, to blame things on him in regards to this conspiracy that the state is blaming on Michael Jackson. I mean, that's the bottom line here. It's very clear that Mark Garagos did not want to come here and testify. He sent an associate attorney here, a man named Shepard Kopp, yesterday to talk to the judge and say, you know, Mr. Garagos is in a trial. He's just too busy. And the judge, in effect, said, too bad. Here's a subpoena. 8:30 tomorrow morning. If he's not here, I issue an arrest warrant, period. I mean, the judge was having none of it. So, as you see, Mark Garagos sort of swaggered into court today, looking casual, like nothing much was going to happen bad, and put a piece of gum in his mouth. And it's kind of interesting. He's sitting on ice somewhere in this courthouse, probably upstairs near a room that the defense team uses, while the court has been ordered to go ahead with the witness that they already had on the stand, a man named David LeGrand, who was yet another attorney of Michael Jackson's.
So we ordered to get here at 8:30. He's there at 8:30, but still waiting to be called on. Diane, we know that the defense attorneys for Michael Jackson have, throughout the case, especially with the conspiracy charge we're talking about, tried to deflect it all and push it off on some of these other people who were surrounding Michael Jackson, acting as advisors. Exactly. Do we think, and again, we're not certain what's going to happen here, so I'm asking your educated guess if I can, do we think that Mark Garagos will be asked questions to contribute to that theory, it was others, or do we think that they're trying literally to point the finger at Mark Garagos as somebody who was doing something inappropriate in Michael Jackson's name?
Yeah, you have put your finger directly on it. I think it's risky that Tom Mesereau is calling Mark Garagos to the stand. He has already, in this courtroom, pointed the finger of blame at Mark Garagos for several things, not the least of which was hiring a private detective and a surveillance team to follow this family around and scare them half to death. Tom Mesereau has made that point several times to this jury here. Mark Garagos is also, it's been testified, tried to get a crisis management person for Michael Jackson, a woman named Ann Kite Gabriel, to sign a private detective's confidentiality agreement so she could never be able to testify or speak about Michael Jackson. She refused to do that, and she came here and testified to it. So Tom Mesereau wants Mark Garagos here to make the point that all the other unindicted co-conspirators were nefarious. I don't think he's calling him here to you know, grill him on the stand. But I think that's exactly what the state is going to do when the state gets him. There's been a lot of testimony that Mark Garrigus directed things from the very beginning. He was hired in early February, right about the Martin Bashir time, and he is, we've had testimony here from Rudy Provenzio, for example, Ann Kite Gabriel, for example, and others saying Mark Garrigus was intimately involved from the very beginning about how this crisis campaign was managed. So I think the state is really going to have a lot of questions for Mr. Garrigus, and I can't see how they will be finished with him today. I think he's going to have to swagger back another day.
Diane, I got to tell you, I envy your ability to sit in there and watch what has got to be an exciting moment when Mesereau takes on Garrigus. And even though he's calling Garrigus, as you suggest, if Garrigus doesn't want to be there, it's going to be a little tense in that courtroom, and I love that. But we are getting already a lot of emails, so please indulge us and explain for our viewers why it is that attorney-client privilege is not an issue when Mesereau puts Garrigus on the stand to talk about Garrigus's relationship with Jackson at an earlier point in time.
Well, it's got to have been waived. I mean, simply put, the attorney-client privilege has apparently been waived. We haven't heard that yet because Garrigus isn't on the stand, but David LeGrand is on the stand now, a Las Vegas attorney, and it was made clear that he has waived the attorney-client privilege with Mr. Jackson so he can come here and testify.
And indeed, it is waived then by Michael Jackson, and I guess that gives me an opportunity to ask our guest, Alan Ripka.
Is Michael Jackson was in on the meetings. He was in on the meetings with Al Melnick. He was in on the meetings with Ronald Conitzer and Dieter Wiesner, wherein they talked about, quote, the entire situation and what they should do about the Martin Bashir fallout.
Diane, it would seem then, and now I'm going to look at this as a prosecutor, the first part of what you were saying would certainly be helpful for the defense, but if I'm the prosecutor and I hear him say, oh yeah, Michael Jackson was involved with all these meetings, I'm saying, bingo. You know, again, it's a conspiracy. You don't have to be involved in every element of the conspiracy, but if you're involved in one of the spokes of that conspiracy and have knowledge of the conspiracy, that's enough to put you in the game here. So I suspect the prosecutors were pretty pleased about that part.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine so, and I would imagine that's why it's taking David LeGrand so long to answer every question. There's a question put to him, and you can just sort of see the gears in his head moving, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and 20 seconds later, he gives this long, convoluted answer. He refuses to answer yes or no to anything.
I tell you, Diane, that's the kind of witness who actually makes me happy we don't have a camera in there. Sometimes the witness...
But this...
Garrigos's testimony and attorney-client privilege. Tell us about these legal issues.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Here's what happened. The defense went on. When Garrigus first took the stand, let me back up a little bit, he turned to the judge at one point after giving his resume, and he said, Your Honor, I don't have the attorney-client waiver in my hand. I'd feel more comfortable if I had it in my hand. And the judge looked at Tom Mesereau, and Mesereau sort of looked around the desk, and he said, well, gee, we don't have a copy here, but I represent to the court that it has been signed by Michael Jackson, and Mr. Garrigus is free to testify. Fine. We went on. We had the direct examination. Then the cross-examination started and only was conducted for a few minutes before we took our regular afternoon break. It was during that afternoon break that Mark Garrigus finally saw this waiver. And when he came back into court, he almost immediately told the judge, you know what, I've just seen this. It has an end date on it. I am not allowed to testify about anything after Michael Jackson's arrest. And so, Your Honor, there's a lot of things here I just can't testify to. The judge was absolutely livid. He admonished Tom Mesereau for, quote, misrepresenting the waiver to the court. And now we are, as the judge said, what do we do now? I mean, we are in a dilemma. The jury has heard a lot of very good things about Michael Jackson from his former attorney. They did see a little bit of cross-examination, some of it vigorous, but the entire cross-examination is not done, and the judge simply does not know how to proceed. He's ordered Mark Garrigus back here next Friday. In the meantime, everybody's filing motions and points and authorities, and they're going to try to figure out just what to do. Does the judge strike all of Garrigus's testimony? Does he sanction the defense? Does he say, okay, fine, you can't talk about anything after the November 20th arrest? We just don't know.
Diane, on direct, though, did Garrigus talk about after the November 20th direct? Had he already talked about it during direct?
Yes, he did. He talked about things that he had learned after the arrest of Michael Jackson, most notably details about that 1993 payout by Michael Jackson of $20 million. He answered those questions in the morning under cross. But then in the afternoon, after he saw the waiver, he clammed up on that particular issue, and that's what started the whole debate.
Okay.
So, you know, I think Geragos was put in a very tough position, and I don't think he understood exactly what was going on till he saw that waiver in the hallway.
So what can we expect from the defense today?
Well, things are all verklempt, as they say. You know, I think the defense planned to have Geragos on, then Bradley Miller, then a man named Christian Robinson, the one who did the questioning of the family during the rebuttal video. But Geragos is not done yet. So my best sources tell me that there'll be some sort of lesser important witnesses today. A dentist to whom the mother and the children went. The inference there is that she could have talked to the dentist about we're being held captive. We'll hear from the person who drove them to the dentist. We'll hear from the body waxer and the person who drove the mother to the body waxer. And we may also hear from a police officer named Russ Burcham, who I think they want to use him to try to impeach some of the past witnesses.
All right, Diane, thanks so much for that report. Diane Diamond, of course, reporting live from Santa Maria, California. Stay tuned to Court TV. We will continue to have live updates from outside the courthouse. We'll also have specials on the Jackson trial.
How are you?
Great. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is we've had, I think it's a record-breaking 8 witnesses taking the stand here today. Various different people who had interaction with the Doe family, the mother and the children during that crucial period of early February, March 2003. First of all, first up, I'll run through them real quick. A dentist who took off the boys' braces.
Diane, I don't want to rush you. I feel like I'm right there in the courtroom when you describe everything. Okay, go ahead. Take your time.
Okay, well, there was a dentist on the stand today, and she talked about taking off both of the braces of both of the boys, which was a questionable call because they had only recently got the braces on. And mostly what she was questioned about was the accessibility to her office. There were back doors that anybody could have opened and quote, escaped. There were telephones all over the office. If somebody wanted to make a call out, say, for help, they could have done that, but they didn't do it. She described both of the boys as being a little rambunctious. The older one, the accuser in this case, as actually being pretty rude, and her secretary, orthodontist assistant, testified to the same thing. Then we got the body wax lady on, Carol McCoy. She says she got a call out of the blue from Neverland Ranch. Somebody, in this case the mother of the accuser, wanted to get a body wax and her hair done, and someone from the ranch drove her there, a woman named Katie Bernard, who also testified. And remember when the mother was on talking about the body wax? Well, she said, no, it was just a leg wax. You know, don't make it sound like I took Michael Jackson for a lot of money. It was only a leg wax. Mesereau said to her at the time, do you want to see the receipt? No, she said, all that can be choreographed. Well, today we saw the receipt. According to the receipt, it wasn't just a leg wax. It was a brow wax, a face wax, a bikini wax, a leg wax, and it all totaled $140. So this goes to the mother's veracity, of course. Katie Bernard testified about taking the mother to the spa day. She was only in there about 45 minutes or an hour, and they made a plan for her to go back the next day, get her hair done. She said, as we were driving, the mom began to talk about her ex-husband, how she was trying to get away from him, how bad she had it, and how nice Mr. Jackson treated her and her family. She was praising Mr. Jackson the whole time, and I was thinking, I don't know this lady. I can't believe she's telling me all of this. As with almost all of the witnesses, Katie Bernard was asked, well, did they look like they were being held against their will? No. Falsely imprisoned? No. Was Michael Jackson, did she say Michael Jackson was doing anything bad to her or her family? No. Let's see. The next one was Maria Gomez, and this was a maid at Neverland Ranch. She was interesting in that she had a lot to say about the children and their rooms. They actually had guest units assigned to them, although we've had testimony here, as you know, Nancy, that they spent the night, and the two boys anyway, spent the night in Michael Jackson's suite. But this woman, Maria Gomez, said that she cleaned up the guest rooms. Was it hard to clean the boys' rooms? Oh, see, she said. She was testifying through a translator. She said those children were tremendously messy, a filthy mess the room was, candy wrappers everywhere. Was it clear that they were using the rooms? Were they sleeping in the rooms? And the maid said, yes, I don't know if they were wild when they slept, but the sheets and blankets were always taken out of the beds. I think she meant off of the beds. It happened many, many times. Then Shane Meredith came forward. Let's see, Shane Meredith, he was, he worked as a security officer for a while at the ranch, just a short while. He works at Lompoc Prison now. He found the two brothers down in the wine cellar one night doing a routine security check. He noticed that there was a light under the door, so he went down, he sort of snuck down to investigate, and he says he found the two Doe brothers, John and James Doe, down there, giggling, laughing, pushing each other around with an open bottle of alcohol there on a table in a kitchenette area. He told them to get out of there. Was Mr. Jackson there? No. Did they respond to your command? Oh, yeah. He said they were shaken. They hightailed it out of there. They ran up the steps. The bottle, he said, he noticed was half full. But on cross-examination, he was asked, well, is that the only time you caught him there? Yeah. Did you see any glasses to go with that bottle of wine? No. Did you smell any alcohol? No. Was the door often left open? He said, yeah, chefs and cooks and maids would go down there to get food out of the refrigerated section. And then the last witness up when I left the courtroom, and then there was a break, is Commander Russ Burcham of the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. I remember Russ Burcham from the 1993 investigation. He was one of the lead detectives here, and he's being asked about the 1993 case, especially about Qasim Abdul and Ralph Chacon. These are two of the old security guards who came here and testified during the 1108 section of this trial, you know, that hearing on the past bad acts. And he talked about meetings that he had with them, but they never said what they had seen at Neverland Ranch. They sort of demanded, and they got, a face-to-face meeting with District Attorney Tom Sneddon. And at that time, they asked questions like, well, what if we had some information about criminal activity? What would happen? Could we get into the witness protection program? They also said apparently that they told them at the time, Qasim Abdul and Ralph Chacon told these law enforcement types at the time that they could get money from the tabloids for what they knew, words to that effect, but they really felt morally obligated not to do that. Instead, they wanted to go to the grand jury and tell the truth, and in fact, they did do that, Nancy. And then Tom Sneddon came up to cross.